But if you believe in it, then why not allow this clause?
I call the Honourable Andrew Little.
Mr Chairman, I just want to take a brief call to respond to the somewhat repeated argument that's been put up, and I did respond to it earlier, but I think it probably pays to respond to it again, and raised by the member who's just taken his seat about, and it's very good that he comes out in favour of a review by the Select Committee of the operation of the Electoral Act. He should talk to some of his colleagues who have a different view about who should conduct the review, and so it is not helpful that the divisions within the National Party are played out here on the floor of Parliament. But to Mr Narrow, what I would say is that the Select Committee already conducts a post-general election review every time, and sometimes a post-by-election review, and members of that committee can set the scope of that review. So to the member Brett Hudson, who raised the question, but didn't raise a question, but simply asserted the argument, that although current members of the Select Committee have the power to set the scope, perhaps they don't set it wide enough. Well, that's a matter for members of that committee. They set the scope and they can do that. And they can set it, and if they don't inquire into matters arising out of a general election, they can commission an inquiry into anything over which their committee has jurisdiction. So they can have a separate inquiry into the operation of that part of the Act. The Select Committee already has that power. So an SOP that provides for a Select Committee to do that is totally and utterly superfluous. I think in the same vein, the Right Honourable David Carter made a similar argument, and he posed the question, in relation to a Select Committee review. He said, what's wrong with that? And I don't disagree with him. There's nothing wrong with it, which is why it happens now. And it doesn't have to be legislated for. To do so would make it completely superfluous. And in fact, he even raised the question, what would be wrong with the Electoral Commission doing it? Well, actually, the Electoral Commission does do a review of each election, by-elections and general elections. They tend to focus on the administrative efficacy of their work and any issues that they perceive have arisen as a result of legislation. And so they give that advice to the committee and to Parliament on a frequent basis. The Honourable Mark Mitchell posed the question about proportionality of Parliament, not really within the scope of the SOPs, but the issue is this is about the electorate's verdict being respected. And sometimes electorates, when they have the opportunity to do so mid-term, change their mind about who they want representing them. And when that happens, as a result of the voters having their say, then Parliament has to respect that. And that might change the proportionality of Parliament mid-term. But it's not the proportionality of Parliament being determined at the whim of an individual member who decides they want to sally forth and do something completely different. That would be the height of arrogance. That would be a breach of the social contract with all electors, that members come here not to indulge their own kind of fantasies, but to do the job they were elected to do, to stand under the banner they were elected on and to maintain the proportionality of Parliament. Other members have spoken. The member Simeon Brown referred to, look, it is right there should be an entity outside of the House who should conduct the review, but then he sort of couldn't pick between one of three outside entities who should conduct it. That doesn't help the debate. Members opposite, if they're going to come up with alternatives, it would help if they had a united alternative. Then they don't. And finally, in relation to Dr Nick Smith, I totally reject his sort of saccharine description of his conduct and behaviour, both in the Select Committee and in this House. His attacks on public servants is absolutely uncalled for. It reflects absolutely poorly on him. It is dirty, filthy, grubby behaviour that has no place in this House, and any person wanting to call themselves a member of this House should not claim the privileges of this House to abuse public servants. It is bullying, it is abuse, it is nasty, it is uncalled for, and it is absolutely appalling. And that member owes the Ministry of Justice and its officials a very, very far-reaching apology.
I call David Seymour.
Thank you very much, Mr Chair, for this call. I was just working away in my office with the